January 31st was a normal day like no other. All was going as planned as I've just finished a 12-month lease in my apartment. The complex has raised the rent above my budget, so I've decided to look for a different apartment in a more decent price range. The apartments I found online have little pictures on display, sadly. Mainly just tiny little photos of the building itself, no real interior. I typed in the address provided on the website and arrived in a secluded area of town, much further away from the downtown, with little to no traffic. I met with the realtor once I arrived at the apartment and realized it was much smaller than the photos shown, but the monthly rent was well within my budget, so I couldn't question it. We discussed payment, and after paperwork and all the fun stuff was over, I was a proud tenant. Relieved after being able to find a place after such a short notice for a good deal, I decided to treat myself to a local bar. Once I had a couple drinks down, I met this guy named Mike. We've talked for quite some time about ourselves, and he asked if I'm from around here. I told him not originally, but I've just moved in down the street a couple of blocks. He said he lives more downtown and asked why did I move on the edge of town. I replied simply, I needed a place quick and got a good price for it. It was going pretty good, so I invited him over to my place for a few more drinks since I haven't had any friends since I moved, and surprisingly he accepted the invitation. We pulled up to my apartment building and exited the car to head upstairs. Mike's face grew worried as we arrived. Not knowing what's gotten into him, I asked him if everything was alright. He tells me that he recognizes this apartment building from the news. Mike quickly and fiercely asked me what my apartment number was. I said it was 1336, and his face grew pale, as if he had seen a ghost. He demanded that we take him anywhere but that apartment building. I asked him in a hurried manner, what's wrong with my building? He replied with the most terrifying story I've ever heard. My face was in utter shock and made me feel uneasy. The story, so he says, goes, once, some time ago, in apartment 1336, was this man that would sleep in a crawling space between the walls of apartment 1335 through 1336. Every other night, the man would come out, silently, while the tenant was asleep, and set up a camera at the foot of his bed and film him just staring at the man sleeping for around 20 to 30 minutes, and then he would return into the crawl space. I have to admit, after hearing that story, I was a bit skeptical about how the man would keep a camera with him in the crawl space, or even how he would watch it. But Mike tells me, whether I believe it or not, he just wants to get as far away from here as he can. Once I get back from taking Mike to his place, my mind started racing as it's my first night actually staying in my apartment. As I lay there in my bed, I start to hear a ticking noise coming from what seems like the inside of my closet. Thinking back onto Mike's terrifying story, my mind started racing, and I began to wonder if the stories Mike told me were true. After a few hours of passing and the ticking started back up again, it sounded, best I could say, was similar to a pen clicking. I got out of my bed and went to go check the closet door. I opened the closet door, and to no surprise, there was nothing in there. So I tried to ease my troubled mind and crawled back into my bed, not thinking about the ticking sound to the best of my ability. Some time has passed now, and the ticking sound hasn't happened for some time. So, fast forward a few nights, and not having the clicking sound around for some time, I was actually starting to get some peaceful sleep. But of course, as soon as the peace started, that's when the clicking did. One night, I was in a halfway point between asleep and awake. I heard what I could have sworn sounded like a camera beep. I was for sure Mike's story was starting to get to me. That's when I opened my eyes to see there was nothing there. I peer out of the covers, revealing there was nothing but an empty room. Nothing else occurred for the rest of the night. Once morning came, I quickly called Mike to see if there was any details surrounding the event that took place in my apartment. The call went straight to voicemail, so I assumed Mike didn't want anything to do with me anymore after the occurrence with my apartment and the story he told me with the news. So I brushed it off, went on with my day. As night came, I was more aware than the previous night, and pretty much waiting for any type of activity. A few hours passed, and no sign of any activity at all. I decided to call it a night, head to the bathroom, and brush my teeth. As I start brushing, I hear something coming from the bedroom. It sounded like something hitting against the closet door, similar to a knee or shoulder hitting it by accident. I go to check it out, but no sign of anything. At this point, I'm convinced I'm starting to lose my mind. So I researched the story Mike told me, and I found no results anywhere. No reports of any kind, no news story. At this point, I just kind of laugh it off, thinking Mike was just trying to scare me, being the new guy in the area, and wouldn't know any better. Once I was finished with my research, I decided to shut my laptop and proceed to lie down. With an empty mind, I closed my eyes and began to drift off to sleep fairly quickly. Once asleep, I was awoke by a strange noise similar to a low battery beep on a camcorder. I peeked from my blanket once again, only this time I see a figure standing out at the foot of my bed. The figure doesn't notice me looking at it. It was too dark to see. I took this to my advantage, reacting swiftly and grabbing my phone, switching on the flashlight to shine at the figure. As I flashed him, I caught a glimpse of the figure as he decided to run towards the front of the door. My stomach sunk once I realized who the figure was. It was Mike who had been making the noises at night. Once he left the apartment, I investigated the closet further and found a pull cord coming from the wall. I pulled it to reveal a secret crawl space behind the wall. In the crawl space had collections of tapes labeled with dates, first names on the cases. I called Mike to double check on him before I started accusing him, because it just seemed all like nonsense. But no answer again, straight to voicemail. Fast forward a couple of weeks since that incident, I haven't had any more unexplained noises waking me up in the middle of the night. I lie down for night and decide to turn on the TV to have some background noise. And on the television, the news story. It shocked me. They were covering a story about a man who was just recently murdered after discovering someone had been living inside his residence at the same time. The information and image they provided me made it very clear. It was Mike.